Welcome back to the channel, and my main goal has always been to be the most realistic poker vlogger out there, so I have an announcement to make. I'm officially dropping down in stakes for the foreseeable future, so let's break down why. In 2024, I moved up from playing 1-2 to being a full-time 1-3 match stack player, which on most days played like a 2-5 and sometimes 5-10 game. I'd usually start off buying in for $500, but a lot of the times I'd get the itch to gamble big and add on up to $2,000 just to challenge myself and compete with the big stacks. I felt pretty comfortable throughout the year playing these stakes and even had my most profitable month of my poker career in September of $3,705 right before I took my break. So things were going pretty good in terms of poker, but then life hit.
Take a chance and risk getting knocked out. Oh my God! Wow!
I just bought a new home earlier this year and recently had my second kid. And with that, we just got hammered with a few major bills. Between property taxes, reaching our health insurance deductible, and maxing out our retirement accounts, which we do at the end of each year, there's a big pit in my stomach with the amount of money that just left our bank account. Given all that, I just don't feel comfortable risking $1,000 to $2,000 a session playing 1-3 match stack right now, especially before the holidays. For the rest of 2024, I'm officially dropping down in stakes to 1-2 where I could just chill and have some fun splashing around. We're currently on a 9-session win streak, which is the longest of our poker career, so hopefully we could keep it going and hit double digits with the win today. We buy into the 1-2 game for the max of $300, but before we dive into the poker hands, I gotta announce my weekly Monday Club GG meetup games are back. There's always crazy action, and I give away $100 each time, so if you want in, click the Club GG link in the description. We start off bleeding from our chip stack by losing some uneventful small pots, so we're immediately forced to add on $100, and right away we're into the game for $400 total. In our first notable hand, there's one limp in early position, and I look down at the beautiful Queen 10 of diamonds and raise it to $10. This 1-2 game is pure action so far because we get 4 callers. Dealer throws out a flop of Ace Queen 7 with 2 clubs giving us middle pair. Action gets checked to me, and in a super multi-way pot, I don't see a point in betting with middle pair, so I check as well. The hijack decides to bet for $25, and the player to my right puts in the call. In the past, I've been guilty of calling in this spot and hoping to hit a queen or a 10 for trips or 2 pair, but as my poker skills have progressed, I've learned that's a pretty horrible play. A 10 could easily give someone a straight or a better 2 pair, so basically we're only calling to hit a queen. And even then, a lot of low-stakes players don't 3-bet queen-jack or king-queen, so we could basically be drawing dead in this spot, which is why it's an easy fold. I muck, and the player to my left calls as well, so let's keep the camera rolling. Turn is a 9 of clubs, bringing in the front door flush. Checks to the hijack again, who bets massive and throws out a bet of $105. Just the player to my left calls, and the river comes out the 8 of diamonds, and action goes check-check. Player to my left shows ace-jack offsuit with the jack of clubs, and the hijack shows pocket 7s for a flop set. The key lesson in this hand is don't get married to your middle pair holdings in multi-way pots. In our second hand of note, there's 2 limps, and I look down at the cowboys, pocket kings. I decide to raise them to $10 in the small blind since I wanted to ensure I'd get action. Luckily, both players call, so the pot's sitting at $30. Flop comes out Jack 10-5 rainbow, and I throw out a standard bet of $10 and just get 1 caller in middle position. Turn is a pretty good card in the 5 of diamonds pairing the board and putting 2 diamonds out there. I decide to keep value betting and throw out a half pot bet of $25. I figure a jack will never fold and maybe I could get called by a 10, but our opponent doesn't wait too long before tossing their hand in the muck. It took about 45 minutes, but we finally scooped in our first pot of the day. In this next one, I open A7 of clubs to $10 and get 2 calls. 3 ways to a flop of 10-6-3 rainbow with 1 club. I like c-bet bluffing these boards where 2 pairs should never be represented, and if they don't have a set, they should have a draw or a 1-pair hand at best. So I decide to c-bet $15 and get action from the button. I'm hoping for a club or a high Broadway card so I could continue bluffing and put pressure on all his 1-pair holdings. But unfortunately, the turn brings out the 5 of hearts, which is a terrible card for both our range and specific hand. I decide to check, hoping our opponent checks it back, but he throws out a bet of $45, which forces me to snap fold. The session's off to a terrible start, and we add on another $100 to top off my stack, which makes us into the game for $500 already. In this hand, Under the Gun starts off with a limp, and early position opens to just $5. This player almost always limps in with their entire range, so even though it's only $5, at minimum I think they have ace-jack suited and 10s plus. Next stack calls the $5, and for the second time today, I look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings. Obviously going for the 3-bet, so I make it just $15 to go, and we get calls from the Under the Gun limper, original opener, and player in middle position. Pot's already up to $60, and we get a very favorable flop of 3 deuce-deuce with 2 clubs giving us the overpair. Under the Gun checks, and now early position decides to take the betting lead and throws out a $35 bet. A lot of low-stakes players will make this bet with their overpairs for protection, or bet their major draws trying to take down the pot, hoping I 3-bet with a hand like ace-king and I'd fold. I'm obviously never folding, but I think in this spot raising would be an overplay against this specific player. I've played with this player a ton throughout the years, and she never pays me off in these big spots. So if I was to raise, I can guarantee she folds all the pocket pairs that I have beat. Another reason I don't want to raise is to keep the Under the Gun player in with the pairs that I have dominated and allow him to put more money in the pot with minimal outs. So I put in the smooth call, and just like we wanted, the Under the Gun player calls as well. Turn isn't the best card in the deck, and the 7 of clubs bringing in the front door flush. Under the Gun checks, and now this player bets a huge amount of $135. I expected her to slow down and check, so with this sizing, I think she either has a flush or was trapping with aces with the ace of clubs. Despite still having the overpair, I decided to toss my hand in the muck, and to my surprise, Under the Gun goes all in. Early position snap calls, we have a huge pot for 1-2. River is a blank, and they both reveal their hands. Early position shows ace-queen of clubs for the nut flush, but Under the Gun shows pocket 7s for the turn full house. We got the action we wanted, but the turn was the worst one we could have asked for. Luckily, we were able to get away from it and lose the minimum. Before I could even add on chips to my stack, we get involved in another action-packed hand. I look down at pocket deuces and decide to limp along and throw in the $2. A few more people put in the $2, so we're going 5 ways to a flop of queen 3 deuce, giving us bottom set, which is basically the nuts since pocket queen should never be represented in a limped pot. Checks all the way to me, and I was about to bet, but the player to my left already had a $5 chip out and was ready to throw it in, so I decided to check and go for the check raise. He puts in the $5, and 3 players in front of me all put in the call. It's time to bloat up the pot, but since this board is so dry, I don't see the point in betting too big. I settle on a sizing of just $20 and only get action from the early position limper. This player almost never gets out of line and doesn't like giving action unless they have top pair or a draw. So I'm putting him on a queen or 4-5 since I'd assume all his low pair holdings would muck. So we go to a turn heads up and see the ace of clubs, which is by far the worst card in the deck. 4-5 gets there for the straight, and if you had a hand like queen jack or king queen, it's going to be hard to get value since the ace is such a scare card. So when he checks, I decide to check it back since I think we only have a hand that's worth 2 streets of value. We go to a river, and the dealer throws out the king of clubs, bringing in the backdoor flush. Our opponent wastes no time before throwing in a $25 bet, and the way he put out the chips just felt like he was super confident in his hand. I'm obviously never folding, especially after checking back the turn, but I think raising here would be an overplay. I put in the chips, and our opponent turns over pocket 3s for the rare set over set. Never fun being on the wrong side of the old set over set scenario, but once again we somehow managed to lose the minimum, which is the only thing I'm happy with today since we're getting our ass kicked. Nothing's going right today, so when that's the case, you should probably call it quits and walk out the door. So if I was smart, that's probably what I'd do, but we have a 10-session win streak to try and pull off. So I reach into my wallet and add on $200 more, so we're now into the game for $700 total. Let's try to get some momentum going, and what better way to do that than with the best hand ever created, pocket aces. There's 3 people that limp, and I raise the bullets up to $13. We get action from the first limper in middle position, so with $40 in the pot, the flop comes out 9-7-4 with 2 hearts, giving us the overpair. I throw out a standard half pot bet of $20, and since I have the ace of hearts, that means there's less flush combinations out there, and I don't want to go too big to allow all the weak one pair holdings to fold. Only the player in middle position puts in the call, so the pot's now doubled to $80. Turn isn't the best, and the jack of clubs and the obvious straight draw gets there, but I should still bet around half pot to target all his weaker flush draws and 9x hands. Instead of being smart and doing that, I decide to check it for no reason at all. River comes out the 8 of diamonds, putting 4 to a straight. With this run out, I should be checking and giving him rope to bluff since this would be a scare card for most of my range, but instead of doing that, I decided to throw out a bet of $25, not really knowing what I'm targeting, which is never a good idea. He ended up folding, and we botched this hand completely. But I'll honestly never complain when money is pushed in my direction, just gotta take note of my mistakes and keep on improving. We're down about $340 at this point, so I think a comeback is still in the realm of possibilities. I look down at Queen 10 of spades in early position and open it up to $12 over a button straddle. Only the small blind ends up putting in the call, so with $25 in the pot, the flop comes out Ace Queen 8 rainbow, giving us middle pair. Small blind checks in flow, and I throw out a bet of $10. I could mix in a check, but I like to get value from the gut shot straight draws and weaker hands like Queen 9, 9-8, or 7-8 that would call a small bet. He puts in the chips, and we go to a turn which peels off the king of clubs. He checks again, and now we have an easy check back. River is a beautiful queen of hearts giving us trips, but now our opponent throws in a pretty big bet in comparison of the pot of $45. Not my favorite spot to be in, but I'm obviously never folding trips, so I put in the chips expecting to be good, but our opponent turns over Jack 10 offsuit for the nut straight.
Son of a bitch!
We look down at King Queen of clubs under the gun and open it up to $10. This game isn't short of action because we get 3 calls. With $40 in the middle, the flop comes out Queen 9-6 with 2 diamonds, giving us a solid top pair. Small blind decides to donk lead out for $10, and to me, this bet seems like someone that's trying to set the price to hit their draw. So I'm not having any of that and raise the price of poker to $35. Everyone else gets out of the way, but the small blind puts in the call. I'm putting him on diamonds, Jack 10 or 7-8 for the straight draw, and sometimes a queen or a 9. We go to a turn with 110 in the middle, and the dealer throws out the 8 of hearts. Not my favorite turn card because it's a lot better for his range, so when he checks, I decide to check it back and see what happens on the river. River is the ace of diamonds bringing in the front door flush, and this board just got worse and worse. Our opponent now throws out an annoying bet of $20 into a pot of 110. In my head, I figured I was somehow beat, but this amount just felt way too cheap not to call and see what he had.
I feel like I'm getting milked. Yeah. Nice.
So I throw in the side call, and he shows 9-7 of diamonds for the rivered flush. If he bet any bigger, I probably would have folded, but I'm clearly playing like shit today, and the result speaks for itself. We added on another $100 bill, cause why not? So we're into a 1-2 game for $800. We played a little longer and scooped in a couple small pots, but didn't win nearly enough to complete the comeback. So unfortunately, our personal record winning streak comes to an end at 9. Let's get to the outro.
I think it's safe to say we got our ass handed to. In for 800, and out for only 327 for a $473 loss. Poker isn't fun when you have second best every hand, so hopefully we could change that for tomorrow.
Yesterday obviously wasn't a fun session since nothing went our way, so hopefully we could turn that around today. Our first hand comes just a few minutes into the session, and I open ace-queen offsuit to $10 in early position. Middle position puts in the call, and now the big blind decides to put in the 3-bet to $30. I usually play ace-queen offsuit as a 4-better fold, but since he only made it $20 more to go, and I have position, I decided to put in the chips. Middle position gets out of the way, so we're going heads up to a flop with $70 in the pot of Jack 10-9 rainbow, giving us the open-ended straight draw. I was expecting our opponent to either check or bet small on this board, but he throws in a pretty hefty bet of $45 leaving him about 130 behind. I could just call and see a turn, but I still have a little leftover tilt from yesterday looming over, so I make sure we could see a full run out and go all in. Our opponent snap calls, which can't be good, so I'm 100% positive we're behind. I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and with $410 in the pot and no more action, the turn is a complete blank in the 4 of clubs, but the river is the best card in the deck and the king of hearts giving us the nuts. Our opponent mucks his hand, and just like that, we scoop in a massive pot to start our day. Not my proudest moment, but like I said earlier, I'll never complain anytime money is pushed in my direction. Just a few hands later, Under the Gun opens the action to just $7, and it folds all the way to me in the big blind, and I look down at King 4 of spades. For only $5 more, I decide to put in the call and see a flop. Flop comes out A7-4 with 2 spades, giving us bottom pair and the nut flush draw. I start off with a check, and our opponent throws out a bet of $9. Throughout the years of playing 1-2, I see a lot of players make the big mistake of over-repping their hand on this type of board and putting in the raise. I think that's a big mistake because no low-stakes player is folding any ace to a raise on this board, and you'll only get action from hands that have you beat. The boards you want to go crazy with a pair and a flush draw would be a flop like 4-5-6 with 2 spades, where your range consists of all the sets and 2 pairs while he's capped at just having overpairs. So given that, I decide to just call the $9, and we go to a turn which comes out the 9 of hearts. I check and flow, and our opponent bets $15. I'm glad he bet small, so once again this is an easy call. I put in the chips hoping for a spade or a 4, and that's exactly what we get when the river peels off the 8 of spades. Pot's sitting at $60, and I'm not going to risk this one getting checked through. I settle on a sizing of $40, looking to target all his ace-10 through ace-king hands. Without much hesitation, our opponent puts in the call. I turn over the winner, and we scoop in back-to-back pots to start off day 2. I decided to move seats to get a better view for the vlog, and not too long after doing so, there's a tight player that opens to $6 in early position. Next stack calls, and now the hijack 3-bets to just $15. Usually these small 3-bets are either a super weak holding that wants to maintain position or a super nutted hand looking for callers. I'm next to act, and I look down at the ladies' pocket queens. I don't want to just call and play this hand multi-way, so since we decided he's either semi-weak or super nutted, I decided to put in the small 4-bet to $35. But surprisingly, the button decides to put in the cold call, which I wasn't expecting. Usually cold calls are pocket pairs or ace-queen and ace-king and not much else. Action folds all the way to the hijack, who decides to cold 5-bet all in for $240. Action's on me, and I decide to snap fold the 3rd best hand in poker. Button ends up snap calling, so we're gonna see a run out. Board runs out all low cards, and the hijack ended up having pocket kings against the button's pocket jacks, which turns out to be insane. I don't think I've ever seen 3 players sitting right next to each other having jacks, queens, and kings all in order. Pretty happy I was able to get away from this hand, and what feels like the 100th time this week, we were able to lose the minimum. We unfortunately go card dead for the next few orbits until this next interesting hand. I look down at Queen 10 of clubs and open it up to $10. Both the cutoff and button put in the call, so with $30 in the pot, the flop comes out Jack-Jack 8 with 2 spades, giving us a gut shot to the straight and a backdoor flush draw. When I'm out of position against 2 opponents on a paired board, I like to start off with a check to see what ensues, and I can make sure I don't get check raised and blown off my equity. Cutoff checks, but now the button bets $15. I didn't check just to fold, so I put in the chips and the cutoff gets out of the way. Pot's doubled to $60, and the turn is a blank in the 6 of hearts. I check again, looking to give up to any aggression, but our opponent checks it back. I don't think he's ever checking back a jack since he needs protection, so I'm either putting him on an 8 or a draw. We go to a river and it peels off the queen of diamonds, giving us top pair. I decide to throw in a value bet of $20, looking to target a non-believing 8 and hoping it looks like a weak sizing and our opponent might turn his missed flush draw into a bluff. Our opponent goes in a mini tank and it looks like he's about to fold, but he ends up putting in the call. I turn over my hand expecting to be good since he took so long to call, but he turns over 10-9 of hearts for the straight. Don't mind how I played it, was just super surprised to say the least. After losing a couple small uneventful pots, we are officially up stuck, which is the worst feeling in poker. For this hand, there's a limp in early position, the cutoff makes it $12, and I'm in the small blind and look down at ace-jack of diamonds. I'd usually 3-bet this hand from the small blind, but the cutoff is a solid player that I don't want to play a bloated pot with out of position, and the player who limped is an action player that I want to be involved with as much as possible. So I just flat the $12, and so does the player in early position, which is exactly what we wanted. 3 ways to a flop with 35 in the middle of ace-10-8 with 2 clubs giving us a solid top pair. I check and flow, and action gets checked around, so I think we have the best hand. Turn is the ace of hearts, giving us trips, and I decide to take the betting lead and throw out a bet of $15, allowing all the small 2-pair holdings to stay in there. Early position calls, and the original raiser gets out of the way. $65 in the pot, and the river peels off the 6 of clubs, which is pretty much a blank. I think betting small and targeting a 10 is a good option, but I also think betting big and making it look like I'm bluffing with a missed flush draw is also viable. So I decided to go with the latter and throw out a pretty hefty bet of $55, which we eventually get called by. I turn over my hand, and it's good after our opponent tosses his hand in the muck. Feels nice to get back in the winner's circle and build our stack in the right direction. A few orbits of nothingness go by before I look down at ace-king offsuit and open it up to $10. Just the player to my left puts in the call, and we get a favorable flop of king-jack-3 rainbow giving us top pair, top kicker. I throw out a standard bet of $10, and he quickly puts in the call. Turn is an interesting one, and the queen of diamonds putting 2 diamonds out there. Some of his holdings improved to 2 pair now, but he could still have hands like queen 10 and jack 10 that we have beat. I decide to check since I don't want to get blown off my equity, and our opponent throws out a bet of $25. Not feeling too great about it, but I decide to put in the call and see what the river brings. River pairs the board with the queen of hearts, which I don't mind seeing, making it less likely he has a queen. I check it over to our opponent, and he snap checks it back. I turn over my hand expecting to be good given the action, but he turns over pocket aces. That was the last holding I put him on, but I'm happy he just flatted my original open because that allowed us to once again lose the minimum. After that hand, we managed to scoop in a couple small pots and get our stack back over the $400 mark before this next hand. There's 2 limps in early position, and a looser player decides to raise to $9. Folds all the way to me, and once again I look down at ace-king offsuit. He has about $100 total in his stack, and I'm trying to get it all. I settle on a 3-bet sizing of $35, hoping he goes all in so we could see a 5-card run out, but that's not what happens because he decides to just put in the call and leave himself $65 behind. With $70 in the pot, the flop comes out 10-9-3 with 2 hearts, and now I have no clue what to do. Even though we missed, I don't like the idea of check folding or betting small, so I decide to say screw it and go all in since we have less than a pot-sized bet left. He snap calls, and we both turn over our hands, and he gives me the bad news and shows pocket 9s for middle set. Turn gives us a sliver of hope in the queen of diamonds, but the river is no help, and we blasted off pretty much all of our profit. After raising with a couple decent hands, but having to give up on a bad run out, we are now officially stuck on the day despite being up over $250 in our first 10 minutes of the session. For this hand, the same player we doubled up last hand opens to $7, middle position puts in the call, and for the 3rd time in a row, I look down at ace-king offsuit. A raise is definitely in order once again, so I make it $30 to go and just get action from the same player. With 65 in the middle, the flop comes out ace-queen deuce rainbow, giving us top pair, top kicker. I figure I'm either way ahead or way behind, and I think my hand only has 2 streets of value for the size of his stack. So I decide to under-rep my hand and start off with a check. Our opponent snap checks it back, so we go to a turn which peels off the 5 of hearts. I decide on a bet of $30 to get value from his weaker aces or non-believing pairs, and he quickly puts in the call. Pot's up to $120, and our opponent has just under a pot-sized bet left in his stack, which is around 100. River peels off the beautiful deuce of clubs, pairing the board and giving any ace a queen kicker. Given our opponent's stack size, I don't think there's any other bet to make than all of it. I put our opponent all in, hoping that he has an ace and will pay it off, since he has such a good kicker now. He eventually decides on a fold, and unfortunately we don't get the revenge in stacking our opponent after we doubled him up, but I'll take it, especially after how the last 2 hours have gone. We played for a little bit longer, but nothing significant happened, so let's get to the outro.
Got off to a hot start, but unfortunately couldn't keep it going. Even though we got below the even mark late in the session, we still managed to book a win. In for the original 300 and out for 356 for a $56 profit.
As for the weekly results, we played a total of 6 hours and 30 minutes of live poker and unfortunately lost a total of $417. Obviously didn't play my best this week, but the cards just weren't in our favor for the entire first day. I'm happy with how we were able to limit the damage in some spots where we should have lost a ton of money, so I'll try and keep that going into our last sessions of 2024. I'm taking Christmas week off, but for the next video, I'm going to go over both my 2024 poker and YouTube income, so keep an eye out for it. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to somehow get me to my year-end goal of 10,000 subscribers.